I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world, sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, my name is Anna, and I am the Natural Birth Podcast host. I'm a former midwife who left the system, and I'm now the proud founder of Sacred Birth International, a woman-owned company with a mission to revolutionize the birth world and bring focus to the sacred and the natural intelligence of the birth process. We do this by providing world-class education, courses, programs, and coaching to equip women with the knowledge and the tools to have conscious pregnancies, empowering and positive birth experiences, and the most nourishing start possible for themselves and their babies postpartum. We also educate and mentor aspiring birth workers into sacred space holders and physiological birth advocates in the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, the Beyond a Doula training. If you'd like to work with me or take any of our courses, programs, or the mentorship, then head on over to sacredbirthinternational.com to find out more. Hi, Nina, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to be here and a little nervous, but I think this is going to fade, hopefully.
Yeah, love that. So I think, everyone's nervous coming onto the podcast. When I'm a podcast guest to other podcasts, I'm nervous. I mean, it's just, I think it's natural, and I think it really disarm me to just share it as well, because everyone can relate to feeling a bit nervous. And before we start, we just tuned in to like that. Whatever comes through both of us will be for the highest good of all, and that we trust that what comes through will serve. So that's all we can do, and then trust the flow of the story and everything that comes through us. So, I mean, I know you already, but I actually haven't really heard the fullness of your birth story. So I'm really looking forward to all the juicy details of your story. You're a mama from Germany, and you're also one of my beautiful Sacred Birth Worker mentees. So with no further ado, please share with us, was it a conscious conception to conceive your son, or was it wow, okay, here we go, we're pregnant?
It was definitely more of a conscious conception. My husband and I, we actually had a moment about 8 months before we actually conceived where I was late on my period. And it was a time where two of our close friends already had their children. And I think they were about maybe 3 months old or so. And I had started to get the baby fever a little bit. And then there was this one time where I think it was 8 days past my period date. And we were like, maybe. But then I got my period, and we were both actually really sad. And so we're like, okay, maybe it's time to try now. Let's get pregnant now. Of course, that didn't work. We tried a little too hard, I guess, for a couple of months. Until then, we actually took the decision to try to not try. And then about 8 months later, including some detox journey on all levels, physical, but also mental, emotional, spiritual, and also the process of deciding to move out of our home in Berlin back then and become nomads. I think 2 weeks after we actually had given away most of the things and then moved out, we got pregnant. So it was conscious in the sense that, yes, we were totally calling in our baby. The timing wasn't 100% conscious, but it was exactly the right timing.
Yeah, they know when to come, don't they?
Yeah.
That's
I always used to say he wanted to become a nomad baby, so it couldn't have been any other date.
wow. So when you became pregnant, were you traveling then or?
Yeah, so for the first, I think 4 or 5 months, we actually continued traveling as we had planned. So back then, this was still with my job mostly because I was doing a lot of speaking opportunities on sustainability and logistics, which was fantastic. And somehow everything started aligning, and the opportunities all of a sudden were in France and in Spain, and we went to Denmark as well. So we were going around Europe quite a bit. And then when we got to the third trimester, we started slowing down again properly, nesting a little bit more again with our parents, spending some time with them. And then I think about 6 weeks before giving birth, we actually decide, I mean, of course, a little bit earlier, we needed to decide, okay, where are we going to give birth? At least for us, that was important in that moment. And because I think at the time, free birth wasn't yet on the horizon, or we weren't ready for it. And so we were thinking between our options. We were actually thinking about either going to Bali, because somehow it came to us, and we had heard of a couple of people actually going there to have their babies, and we've heard of Bumi Sehat, the birthing center. So it was out there, but it was daunting. It was a leap. And then the other option was we briefly considered having a home birth, but at our parents' homes somewhere because we didn't have a home ourselves back then. And it also didn't feel quite right. So then we decided, or actually, it again, the option came to us through my obstetrician, interestingly, and also a friend, and they recommended a beautiful birthing center in Berlin. And so 6 weeks before giving birth, we then moved to Berlin in a sublet to actually prepare for giving birth there. Because once we had seen the birthing center, it was like, okay, this feels exactly right. Just such a beautiful feeling of familiarity. All of the midwives that we met on the open day were just absolutely amazing. And it just resonated so much. It's really one of the really beautiful midwife-led, conscious, holistic birthing centers that you hopefully imagine.
That's wonderful. Did you like know from the get-go that you wanted a natural birth?
Yeah, there was for me it was very clear very quickly. Um, Interestingly, we did have initially a lot of conversation around like the place of birth. So in the very beginning for my husband, I think for him there was no other option than going to the hospital because that's what you see in the movies and what you hear from your own birth stories. Both him and I, we were both born in hospital. My dad, he's a doctor. He's doing anesthesia and emergency care. So for him, definitely it was clear we go to the hospital. We actually had quite a few conversations around that where when I started to tell him, hey, we're going to a birthing center. And he was like, but you need to be in a hospital. You know what? We can make a birthing center out of the hospital where he works, together with the midwife, because we were also talking to one of his colleagues, one of the midwives. She was actually super helpful, and she was also the one that really supported me and also then my husband David in really trusting our intuition and following whatever we think is right. And she said, if that's in Bali, then go to Bali, and anything else, trust yourself. And that was also, especially in the conversations with my dad, for me, that was a really good anchor to know, okay, even though this is my upbringing, even though this is 100% what he believes in, and what I was raised with, it doesn't have to be me. And so, yeah, for me, I can't even say why, but it was so clear so quickly that I want a fully natural birth. I don't want any interventions. I want as little help as possible. I think in my mind I was already coming up, and I read through my birth letter briefly. Everything I wrote down was already like going in the direction of please intervene and do as little as possible as you can, and just let me do. Unless, of course, there's something that I don't see that really calls for support, or otherwise maybe hint me towards it. But yeah, for me, like that, this trusting in my own body, in my baby, in my partner, it was there. And also in nature, of course. Like, yeah, it was just so strong. And I think with every day of the pregnancy, it just grew stronger. Yeah.
Beautiful. Love that. So, do you want to take us back to, did you have any early signs of labor approaching for you, or did it start with a bang? And how many weeks were you when you started to feel that?
Yeah. I was actually just, I think I first thought you were saying about like when you became pregnant. And the interesting is I actually, I did feel it very early on, just because I was feeling the hormones in my body. Like whenever they were being released, I would get a little bit nauseous and then it was gone. That's a really interesting thing. So definitely a wonder how connected you can be to your body and then really sense what's going on. And that was even before the pregnancy tests, but it continued for a couple of weeks. But for labor, my son was born at 41 plus 9, so almost 42 weeks. For me, also there was clear we go however long he needs because he knows. There was actually a little bit of like not stress, but some distress maybe beforehand, mostly on my end, just because at 37 weeks, he was still in breech position. And in German birthing centers, or at least in the birthing center that we were in, you're only allowed to give birth if the baby is head down. And so at that time, we first tried everything like around with moxing, for example, with these sticks which you put to the acupressure points on your pinky toes. But he didn't move. And this was really a test for me, I think, in trusting my intuition and trusting that everything that's unfolding is meant to be, but at the same time also balancing it with support. I wouldn't call it intervention in that sense, but I mean, theoretically, you could say it's anything you do that's not like from nature's intervention. But for me, in my mind, it was mostly like supporting where it's needed. And I think it's a delicate balance, which can very quickly lead to intervention. But what we then were advised to after the moxing and some spinning baby movements didn't work was going to an external rotation. And we went to one of the anthroposophic hospitals in Berlin. And Berlin is actually quite breech friendly. Theoretically, there's a couple of hospitals where you can birth breech naturally, but they also support you in turning a baby first before actually going down there. So we went there for an external rotation, and that was actually really, I mean, for a moment, it was really scary. Just because when she was reading the risks, which she has to, obviously, it went something like, I don't know, there's a risk that the water breaks and that the baby is born now, or that it has to become an emergency or a C-section or an emergency C-section. And then, of course, including death. We just spoke about it yesterday, right? This, like, including death, it's on every waiver that you have to sign when you go into a hospital and have something done. And that really, it just, like, in that moment, I could feel myself fully tense up and really just seeing that this big fear coming up. And yeah, so for me, this was really a moment. It was actually a beautiful practice moment because I was like, okay, if anything pops up in birth, anything that's triggering a fear, I can do this. I can just focus on it in a sense of fully see it and then breathe through it and then really consciously relax my body, relax my mind, and get through this and understand that find back to my trust underneath the fear and any bravery that I need in a moment. And so, yeah, that it was scary, but then turned into a beautiful moment because it showed me what I and my body are capable of. Like even with all of that being so present, really just breathing and relaxing. And then the external rotation itself, I hardly felt anything. It was very gentle. And she also told me, hey, if your baby doesn't want to turn, we're not going to do anything. It's more giving him directions. And if he goes with it, then beautiful. And if not, we're not doing anything.
Yeah, so when it comes to external cephalic version, which is what it's called, ECV, that's how it should be. It should be very gentle, and you should only really try once or maximum twice. And if the baby doesn't want to move or there's resistance, the practitioner really should stop. Um, and that is a risk. There is a risk of the baby actually, for some reason, needs to be breached, like the cord is really short, or there's some sort of reason why this baby's lying breech, right? Its intelligence shows us right where it wants to lie. And the thing is, your baby might have turned anyways at later gestation, right? That's also true. Babies can still move around even though we're coming up later in the weeks. Of course, it's less room, but babies can move. And so it's really important that the practitioner is that conscious and gentle, because if they force and the baby truly is not supposed to move because of whatever reason, then it could be going into distress. There could be something happening that warrants an emergency cesarean, for example. And what you mentioned that you didn't say was that we talked about it yesterday at our master class when it comes to medicalized birth, and how the system needs to protect themselves always, for you to sign these informed consents or waivers if you're declining something, and so on and so forth. And that ultimately they always kind of mention death as the ultimate risk. And that's just because, well, that is just in life, right? And so I think it's important to hear this, because if someone, for example, especially is planning a hospital birth and they're also thinking, well, I'm going to have a natural birth and I'm going to decline things, which I very much support and encourage because there's so much unevidence-based stuff in there, right? We talked about this too at the Medicalized Birth Masterclass. Well, what can happen then, though, is that you'll have to sign these waivers that you're declining CTG, you're declining this and that, whatever, you're going against medical advice. And you have to know that ultimately death is going to be on that waiver. And of course, for you, like you just said, that triggered fear and you could breathe through it and find your center. It helped you kind of understand what you need, the tools you need in labor, which is amazing. And it's great information for anyone listening that if you're deciding to decline something and you're signing these things, just know that that will be there. So that gives you an opportunity now, listening to this podcast, to sit with, okay, like still trust in your decision making. Don't let yourself be swayed by the waiver saying that ultimate risk is death, because it's always going to be there. They have to put it in to cover themselves for absolutely any kind of eventuality and all the things that you decide to do or not to do within the medical establishment.
Yeah. I mean, what they don't put on there is like, what's the actual risk? Like, what's the number?
Yes,
And that would dramatically change
that
how
would
it's
help.
presented, for sure.
If it's like one chance in 100,000, one chance in 10,000, or one chance in 50, like that's a big difference, isn't it? And usually we're talking about one chance in like 10,000 or 100,000 sometimes. Like it's really small risks. And sometimes it's not, and that's good to know, like you said.
Yeah, like whenever I hear this, I always keep thinking my chances of being run over by a car are probably higher.
So much higher. And I always take this example with clients, and I probably said it here before. So if anyone has listened for years, then excuse me for saying it again. But like I usually say that, like when someone's like, and I don't say that there's the risk of death. Well, there is a risk of death, but there's a risk of death every day. Like there's a risk of death getting killed by a coconut. There's, and that's quite rare, but that happens all the time around the world. Not all the time. That's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. And also, like, imagine, I always say this, imagine if you're sitting in your car, you get into the car with your family, you're going to drive away somewhere, just, to the school or whatever. And every time you drive, you have to hear this announcement going, warning, warning, do you really want to drive the car? These amount of people die on the streets every day. Like imagine, like, because that's high actually. And no one's scared of driving usually, right? But that's so much higher than all the risks that we talk about in maternity. So you have to put it in perspective. You're not going to be scared driving in the car because you feel confident. You like, I know how to drive. I've driven every day of my adult life. But there's still like a higher risk of you getting injured or dying there than in maternity.
In the end, death is the only thing that's certain in life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We have to be friends with that. We can't let our life be like geared from that fear, choose love over fear. Yeah,
That was actually a big theme in my postpartum coming up.
I love that. Well, let's dive into your birth story now. So you had
Yep.
that experience. Your baby turned and stayed, apparently.
Yes, yes, he did. Also, like for me, the juggle was really okay. I like something inside me told me he is going to turn. Because I mean, he went on for another 5 weeks, and he was like just doing whatever in there. There was enough amniotic fluid and everything. He had lots of space, so he probably would have turned. But I think this is also important that even if you're in a birthing center, there are certain guidelines out there which will require you to do certain things which are not natural. Um, that's just how it is. And I think for me, that was also a big learning and definitely something that I carry with me that also inspired me to like probably a part that was part of my journey to get into the work of working with men with women and helping them inform themselves and yeah, just being conscious and aware of these things. So yeah, he turned, and then he stayed like this for the whole time until birth. I was nervous about it, and that was mostly the thing that I needed to let go of. Just like again, finding back to that trust in my body, in my baby, and but I did some of the spinning babies movements continuously, and yeah, I think slowly it went better. I started writing a lot about it. It's also in my birth letter. Or it's not the birth letter in that sense, but more of a preparatory sheet that we got also from the birth center to fill out for them to take with them. And then I was doing super well, very, very fit, very active up until the last few days. I did my yoga every day, and we went for walks throughout the whole neighborhood, not the whole city anymore, but the whole neighborhood, up until like I think 2 days before. And then the day before he was born, I actually started feeling a little bit of like heaviness in my body. I could just sense I couldn't walk as fast anymore. I need to slow down. But I mean, obviously I had to slow down throughout pregnancy gradually, but on that day it was just very, okay, oof, my breath is a little short if I walk too fast, too long. And so just really taking it slow, staying inside a bit more, and just relaxing, and resting. And then I think on that day, later in the evening, I also started having the first practice contractions. Or at least I thought it was Hickson-Brack's. I didn't know how it feels, but it was, how would I describe it? It was definitely a sensation, but still very mild. Like I had to breathe a little bit through it, but it wasn't. I was still thinking it was practice. And but just in case, I called the midwife on call that night out of the rotation of the 4 midwives that was on duty in the birthing center at the time. Um, and she just like told me to relax, to as long as I feel confident and feel good, just stay home, rest a lot, sleep as much as I can. And then I was scheduled to come in for a check the next day into the birthing center anyway, just because we were approaching 42 weeks. And of course, like the routine checks, they get the frequency just gets increased quite a lot. And I think if we would have gone past that, we even would have had to go to a hospital more frequently because the chances of us being transferred from birthing center to hospital, of course, would have increased. Unless we then would have said, okay, we choose home birth. But it wasn't our home, so I wasn't 100% confident in that. So we went in for the check. There was actually one CTG done that morning, but it was all good. You could see like mild contractions coming up quite regularly. I think around every 5 or 10 minutes or so. But it still looked like, okay, this might be practice. Baby could be born today, could be tomorrow, could be a few days. And then from the birthing center, we went to this was also knowing what I know now, I don't know what I could have declined, but since it's practice from the birth center, it was just standard that we go to a hospital, one of the partner hospitals, and go in for a ultrasound for checking the amniotic fluid if it's still enough there. And so we went in there, and I remember we needed to wait there for I think 3 hours. And during those 3 hours, the contractions really started picking up. Like I really needed to like concentrate, go inside, and properly breathe through. And I know at some point I was like, are they seriously letting me wait in this like state here for 3 hours now? And they did until we got in, and then ultrasound was all fine, all good. But it's actually a picture of me sitting there. When you see a picture, you wouldn't realize I was giving birth that day. Um, but yeah, and then we went home, watched the movie, and then towards the end of the movie, I told David, okay, I like we need to stop the movie now. I need to concentrate, and I need to properly breathe. And I think it was just a few, maybe it was even during that moment of breathing, where I was breathing so strongly into my belly, like really fully expanding, and then you could hear a plop, or I don't know if you could hear it, but I could hear it at least internally. I definitely could feel it, and plop, and then the amniotic sac opened. So there was just a little gush. Probably it was quite quick until the head was there, closing it again. Yeah, so I guess that's when it fully started. Um, Let me see. Yes. Oh, and actually, I also had some early signs before, because I think at least in the morning before, I had some mucus coming out. And then a little bit later, or I think after the amniotic sac opened, I also had a little bit of a bloody show, but still very, very slimy, very mucus-like. Um, yeah, and so we called again the midwife rotation. And this time it was another or no, actually the midwife I was speaking to in the morning and also the night before, she then told me, oh, okay, that's beautiful. There's going to be another midwife on call, I think, or there's a shift change in a few minutes or an hour or so, and she will call you back. And that was actually the midwife that we had the birth letter meeting with. So she knew exactly what we wanted, what we were hoping for, what we were not planning, but manifesting. And that was actually quite beautiful. There was a lot of familiarity again in there, because maybe I don't know if all of your listeners know what birth in a birth center is like, but since in the birth center where we were, there's about 20 midwives there, and you get to meet some of them, obviously during the prenatal checkups, but you don't know which midwife will be present on the day that you're actually giving birth. And in that birth center, you have the on-call rotation, which consists of 4 midwives, sometimes some student midwives, which accompany them. And yeah, once you call in, one of them comes, and then usually she then stays with you. So it's somewhat of a mix between you have your fully dedicated own midwife, and it's definitely further away from what you see in the standard hospital practice.
So do you mean that you could get any one of the 20, or do you mean that you've met 4 of them and this one of those 4?
No, I think theoretically you could get any of the 20. It really depends on who of them is on call that day. Theoretically, you could have someone you've never met before, can happen.
Right, okay.
But if you're going to the checkups beforehand in the birthing center, which we did, you get to meet a lot of them. So I think we met about maybe 8 or 10 of the midwives. And I think at the time it was maybe only 15 actually that were actively doing labor support.
Well, that's quite different. Usually a birth center is quite small. It usually doesn't have that many midwives. It almost sounds like that's more of like almost like a hospital staff kind of amount. But okay, that's interesting. That's different. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So that's how they do it in Berlin in that birth center. So you got
I think
someone
it's also,
that,
I
so
think it's
that's
also,
nice.
oh, sorry. I just want to say it's also the oldest birth center, I think, in all of Germany. And I guess that's why they are a little bit larger, probably.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's usually less people and stuff in a birth center.
Yeah.
So you got the person that you really um, knew and that you'd written the letter with. That's beautiful. So tell us the
Yes.
story about going in then.
Yeah. So the so when the amniotic sac had opened, I think it was really first a moment of um my husband and I, we just looked at each other and we were like, oh wow, this is happening. We were just super excited and really ecstatic already about it. Um, and it was really this feeling of, okay, this is going to be a celebration of love and life with so much joy and all of the emotions, everything can happen, and it's allowed to be very light. Also, this was exactly what we wrote down in our birth letter, and it was really like in that moment we could feel it so much, like this celebratory um, feeling, and yeah, I think at the time the contractions weren't like super strong. I was like easily able to breathe through them. I think it's also partially maybe due to my year-long yoga and meditation practice, and I've done a lot of breath work. So I felt very prepared through both the physical preparation I had done, but also like the mental preparation as an inner work I have done over the years, actually, not just like leading up to pregnancy, but really I don't know, for the past 5, 6, 7 years, like everything I've done, I felt like, okay, this really solidified my connection to myself, to my body, my grounding, um, knowing how I'm dealing with like blockages that come up or fears that come up, like all these kind of things. So I went in pretty confident. And I think so for the first 1.5 hours or so, we just put on music and we just danced. And in the beginning, it was like quite active dancing, and then at some point, it became more of a swaying. Like I was leaning into my husband, and we were just like slowly moving. Then we had a birth ball available, and I was just like trying out different positions, but still quite actively moving, seeing what suits me, what doesn't. I think at some point I was there sitting in frog position, and then rolling with my back onto the ball. And now thinking about it, might have looked quite odd. I also don't know if it's really the most helpful position, but it was fun in the moment.
And it's
Um,
not really about, it's about following your own instincts. And so if you feel good doing that, who cares what anyone says or if there's any sort of persons like these are the birthing and labor positions? No, it's like you choose. That is woman led. And if you feel like that helps you cope with the contractions or if that makes you relax or whatever it is that made you want to do that, that's perfect. It obviously worked.
yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, to be fair, I was in that position. I was just like for a minute or so, and I was like, okay, this is not perfect. But still, it was fun to try, and also just to be able, as you said, to follow anything that comes up on whichever level. And it was also really beautiful to just be there, the two of us, the three of us, but the last moments, just the two of us present, fully physically. And yeah, we really made the most out of that time and enjoyed it to the fullest. And then then the midwife came for a home visit to yeah, first have a look at how we are doing, to also assess how far we are. And when she came in, I was already like sitting on the bed and in full meditation pose because I had retreated to stillness, and I guess I was going in quite a lot already, and really meditating through my waves, and in between just resting in that state. Um, and then she was sitting down on the floor with her student midwife. We were just like talking a little bit, which was still possible. Um, at the time, I already asked her whether I could just go and take a bath, because the amniotic sac had opened already, so I wasn't exactly sure, but I could feel that I wanted to be in water. Um, and I like yeah, yeah. Now looking back at it, I almost was feeling like, okay, I want to go to the birth center now and just go into the birth pool. And now looking back at it, like I'm sometimes I'm thinking maybe if I would have done that, it would have gone even quicker. But not that it was necessary, but there's just this feeling that like I might have been ready then, or like was close to ready
Well,
already.
you know, that's the thing, you know.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if you have that inkling, like if you feel like that probably was the truth, it probably was the truth. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Well, anyway, at the time, we then actually did a vaginal examination. She offered it, and I guess I was curious. I didn't know everything that I know now, but we did it, and that was about 4 centimeters, um, whatever that means. And so our midwife said, okay, maybe she just suggested, how about you, the two of you, just labor a little bit longer here, as long as you feel comfortable, and then when you feel like, okay, it's time, you call us and you come in. And it sounded okay at the time, so I actually went and took a bath after that, but I couldn't stay in there. Like I was in there maybe for 5 minutes, and then I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. This was not what I was, apparently not what my body was wanting. And then after that, I actually got a little bit of a cold shiver, like maybe it was coming out of the bath and just being cold, but I dried up pretty quickly, but still there were like I was almost getting shaky, you know? And um, I don't know what it was, but I knew this from like completely unrelated different situations where I know like if my hormones are like releasing very quickly, very like a lot of them, I sometimes I do get this. So it it felt there was some sense of familiarity that I felt, which didn't make me panic. But I think if I didn't have that connection, I might have been worried in that moment because I was very cold and shaking quite a lot. So I put on a lot of warm clothes. And then I think shortly after actually the pushing contractions, like pushing sensations started.
Wow.
Um,
I was just gonna say, because that is a thing, right? So when you kind of move through transition as you come to like that shift, some women will vomit. You might get this, well, you get this adrenaline surge. It's like it's bringing you, if you've been in labor land, sometimes then it kind of kicks you out of that and like, it gives you adrenaline and a surge to like now you're going to push a baby out. So now you need all this awareness and power kind of thing. And I was thinking that when you said that. And that's the thing too, again, as you know now, going through the mentorship centimeters tell us very little. It doesn't. And the thing is, when you actually do a vaginal exam, you kind of, it can really speed things up. It can really stir things. Just someone doing that and because when you check for the dilatation, you kind of move around the membranes and the cervix, and that irritates, and that can actually open the cervix quite quickly after that. Potentially, it depends on the person. It's like, but that can really be also a thing that happened after she did that. She kind of triggered something. You went into the bath, you had an adrenaline surge, and because it doesn't sound like it's a lot of time after she was there that happened, or?
There was some time in between, there must have been some time in between because we were at home for another 3.5 hours before we
Mm.
went to the birth center. So I don't know if maybe the surge came a little later and I was actually breathing a little longer after the bath, or I took some more like time after contractions before going into the bath. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure it wasn't the vaginal examination which triggered the hormones. It was more like either labor or like things just got ready. I think when she was there, I was almost ready because it only took about 3 hours after until I really was in transition. Because after like coming back to my not senses, but coming back from the shivering, I was getting uneasy
Mhm.
and needed to I don't know, I was walking around and I was like, okay, I can't find any position here. Very textbook.
Transition.
Um, and then I went into the bath and then the pushing started. And it just like this was the only moment where I would say that my contractions felt like pain or where I felt pain. All of like throughout the whole other hours of labor, everything, it was also everything felt very natural. It was a stretching sensation for sure, but it's something that I know from my yoga practice, from being a dancer for many years of my life. So I'm used to like stretching my muscles, stretching tissue. I know how that feels, and I know how to breathe through it. But in that moment, when the pushing started, it just caught me by surprise. Maybe also because I wasn't expecting it to happen so quickly, and also because it was with so much force. And in that moment, I went into an ah sound, but also I really opened my mouth very wide, and I think I contracted a little bit here in my how do you call these muscles again?
The jaw.
The jaw, yes.
Mhm.
It like I was clenching a little bit like and of course when we're tensing up here, right, everything in the pelvic floor also tenses up, and that's what happened. So there was like a brief moment of pain. But then I remembered, okay, I think I was following the naked doula quite a lot at the time, and she had this saying of floppy face, floppy fanny. And this came into my mind. I was like, okay, relax. You can like, and then I went into primal sounding, quite naturally also, like a lot of oh and ooh and even ah sounds, but with a relaxed jaw. And just following that, and like that actually helped a lot. But there was still a moment where I was like, I told David, I think I cannot do this. And he was like, Nina, snap out of it. You were born to do this. Your body has been literally made for it. And I was like, okay. So like the whole transition was very, very fast. But then I told him, okay, but then we need to go to the birth center now. And then I think he quickly helped me to just put on some clothes, went downstairs, went to find a rental car, like one of the car sharing cars, because we didn't have our own. Luckily did that quite quickly and then parked in front of the street where we were living. And then came up again to pick me up, helped me put on my shoes because I wasn't able to do that anymore. And then just, yeah, very slowly walked downstairs with me. Then we had a funny coincidence because some other people who were probably, I don't know if they were drunk or just had a few drinks or whatever, but they went inside our car because they were thinking it was their like Uber or something. And then I was already sitting when they opened the door, and David was like, "This is not your car. Like we rented this one, and my wife is in labor, and we're going to a birth center now. So back off." I think when they opened the door and saw me just like going through contractions and breathing and sounding, they quickly understood. But yeah, fun coincidence. And then we went to the birth center, which was a 20-minute drive. The I actually I don't remember any of it besides sitting there. But my husband always likes to tell me it was the most beautiful ride of his life. Like the streets were fully empty, no one on there, and he saw the most beautiful sunset. Beautiful scenery, very fitting for our birth. I just didn't see any of it.
You were focused on the task at hand.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just fully inside of my body and just with our baby, with our son, just as I was supposed to be. And then we arrived at the birth center. The midwife was already waiting there, and she then accompanied me inside the birth center, up a couple of stairs, and inside our birth room. I think we were the only ones there at the time, even though interestingly, the couple of weeks before, there was always like, whenever we were visiting, there were so many births going on. I think May is a really strong birth month for some reason. But when we were there, we were the only ones. Um, and then David parked the car, came in. I think when he arrived, I was already like in the tub. I just took all the clothes off and went into a tub and then just like relaxed in there. I think when he came in, he always tells me he was also a bit overwhelmed because like everything was going quite fast. I think at that time we were at about 5 hours of labor from the moment that the amniotic sac opened. So it went quite quick, everything. And then he just did some of the admin stuff, like gave them the documents that they needed and all these kind of things. I didn't notice any of it. Just again, continuously inside of my body, fully present with a baby and with contractions, and really, again, breathing through them, sounding through them. And it all progressed quite beautifully. And then in the water, I was also able to really fully relax, and to let go. I we had this, I don't know how you call it, but there was like this linen hanging down, like, which is supposed, so you can hang yourself in there. I don't know what it's called.
A labor sling.
Ah, yeah. Makes sense. Exactly. And I was hanging in there quite a bit. I was also moving around through the tub through a couple of different positions. So I was like, even though I was in the water, I was still able to really move freely. The water, the warmth, and also the support really helped. And David was sitting on the end of the tub, basically, and just moving with me, whenever I needed him to. And I was just leaning into him, which was giving me a lot of comfort. It's also like, we have this tendency of, like, when we work through things, like, we just lean into each other, and we talk through everything. Of course, talking wasn't what was required at the time. So yeah, just like having that physical support, and also the energetic spiritual support, was very comforting and super helpful for me. And yeah, then I think about an hour or so after, like, arriving in the water, we went back into pushing, actually. Actually, I think the pushing was going on throughout the whole time, but then for the last half an hour, we came up to the crowning, or I went into the position that I birthed him in, which was lying on the side, with the legs somewhat close by each other. And I think shortly before, like, the crowning, like, happened, I was still making a joke, because so what I wanted to say, I made a joke, where I was like, okay, this is everything but just breathing a baby out. Because before, from like things that I have seen and things that I've read, I was thinking, okay, I would love to just breathe my baby out very gently and very silently. And it was definitely not what was happening for me. It was loud and wild and, like, very primal, which was absolutely beautiful, but still very different from, like, what I had, not envisioned, but what I had seen and what I had been thinking about. But it was exactly what I needed, I think, and what was perfect for me. Like that, even now, like, this theme of being wild and untaming yourself. These are really big themes, and I think my birth gave me exactly that, to also connect with that. Even though I love all my gentleness and I love to apply it wherever I can, but I think both of them, they belong together. They need each other. Yeah, so I made that joke. The whole room laughed. So there was two midwives present at the time. The midwife that was, like, supporting us throughout the whole labor, and then she called in one other midwife, for the documentation and everything, who was present also present when we came into the birth center. Yeah, and then I think from there, again, it went super quick. I think the whole, like, last phase took about 30 minutes. And yeah, I was pushing quite a lot, so it was very intense, pushing down naturally already, and then me breathing with it and sounding with it, and, like, also pushing, but with my body, not against it. And then at some point, my midwife suggested, if you want, you can feel for the head. You might start feeling it now, and it was actually, like, it was already there, and I was like, wow, I can feel my baby from the outside, obviously. But it was really, like, it was such a profound moment, just being, like, able to, like, feel him physically for the first time on the outside also. And it was actually an interesting feeling, because I could, like, his head was, it was fully in the birth canal still, so it was uh, contracted a little bit, but it felt as if I could feel, like, a compressed head, like some, yeah, it wasn't like a clean slate. It was more like that. It had a lot of, like, texture to it. And that was very interesting. And then I think it was about two, three more contractions, and then the head was crowning. I did not have a tear afterwards, but I also like um, I don't know exactly what happened, but I just I like when I feel into it, I can just sense that I intuitively probably worked with again with the body and stopped a little bit maybe here and there, or just like pushed against my vagina to support the head a little bit. And I think the head also went back a couple of times to support the tissue in like slowly, yeah, getting used to the stretch. So yeah, that's actually what happened. Yeah, the head went back a few times and then came out again and went back and then came out. So I think this happened about two, three times, and then he crowned. And then I think one more push and the head was out.
Mm.
And then already with the next contraction, the whole head came out. And I was able to like just catch him myself. There was something that I also had written down in my birth letter up front. Like then my midwife, the midwife told us, yeah, like if it works, and then we can definitely try for it. Um, and it worked, and I was so happy about it. And then I lifted him out of the water and onto my chest, and was just like, I think that was really a moment of not shock, but I still need a moment to adjust. Definitely one of the moments. I have that like always in my life when I'm so overwhelmed emotionally, like I can't cry. Like I make crying movements and sounds, but there's no tears coming. And there was definitely a moment like this where I was just so overwhelmed with joy and happiness that yeah, I cried dry tears. And David then came into the water before he was still sitting on the edge of the pool, and then came into the water and support like hugged us, both of us. And yeah, just sitting there for a few moments and looking at our precious baby, starting to realize that we have a son now, and that he's with us now. And then I think the midwife came and brought us a towel, which we had brought, and but that was put onto him. He was skin to skin on me, and we just put the towel onto him so he wouldn't get cold with the water. And then after a little while, the midwife like kept me out of the pool, and I was still holding him the whole time on my chest. Didn't move from there. I think he was crying, like healthy cries, but he wasn't moved away from my chest. And then we went to the bed, which was on the other side of the room, but still within the same room. Everything like the whole time with very dim lighting, very beautiful, cozy atmosphere. Um, and then we were lying down there, and again, just take it. And we were really mostly left alone, just supported with anything that we needed, but very quietly, without a lot of interference, with our bonding that was going on. And then I think about 15 or 20 minutes later, I could sense that I think my midwife also told me it might be possible that you at some point get another pushing sensation, or that you feel like you want to push. Just maybe if possible, let us know. And then when it was like 20 minutes later, I was like, okay, I get a pushing sensation now, and it's coming up quite strong. And then I think they just got and then I was already sitting on a little plastic thingy underneath the towels, just and pushed the placenta out in one go. I think I pushed with the contraction again, but it was so much easier than the pushing with the baby. Yeah, and it came out in one go. It was also like a little blood shower, which was very interesting to feel and to see, but not in a scary sense. It was just like it seemed and felt very natural again. And then they took the placenta, put it in a bowl next to us. We left the cord on. We didn't do lotus birth just because I wasn't I had heard of it once, but more in a sense of my dad telling me, "Oh, have you heard of lotus birth? There's this crazy woman who wanted to keep the umbilical cord on after birth." And I had fought too many fights, I think, throughout my pregnancy on that front. So I just put it aside. And I think at the time I just wasn't fully aware of what a lotus birth is. Again, knowing what I know now, reading also the book in the course of the mentorship, for me, it's like it just seems like the most natural, intuitive thing to just leave everything attached until the baby is ready to let go. Yeah, but at the time we decided to just not clamp the cord or delay it like very much, and we just left the placenta on for I think about an hour and a half. So until really everything had pulsated out of it, at least all of the blood. And so the placenta was put in a little bucket that was standing beside me, and then Kylo was just on my chest. And I think we also still had the placenta on when he started latching for the first time. Yeah, being on my chest, he just was able to move naturally, and he was like tapping around a little bit. He was lying, I think I was lying down a lot, so he was already up here at my neck or at my yeah, neck. And so we needed to put him down a little bit again to crawl again. But he did that very, very beautifully, very actively, and then latched on. And then after that, the midwife also showed us how to, for example, latch on when we were lying down on the side, just so I was aware of what I could do also to support him if needed.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and then I think after an hour and a half or so, my husband then cut the cord. I think it was clamped before, and then he cut through it. And yeah, the rest of the umbilical cord I think came off about 8 days after he was born. Yeah, but so we stayed in the birth center for I think after he was born for a total of three and a half hours. And throughout most of the time, we're left alone, could do our bonding, and then only in the last I don't know, maybe hour or so, the midwife did the I think the APGAR test she did just from observing him, but then she also did like the measurements and like whatever. I mean, we didn't do like the test in that sense, but just the examination. That's what we still did there. And yeah, then we all got dressed. Actually, I also took a shower still in the birth center. I just remember now. So we transferred Kylo onto David's bare chest. So he was continuously in skin to skin care. And I was supported by the midwife in walking over to the shower and took a shower there, which actually felt really good to just, yeah, get the blood off and just get a little refreshment. And then yeah, put on everything, all of the clothes again, pads and everything. And then we went home with a taxi. And I guess we've been at home at about 4 and then slept for 6 hours straight, all of us.
Beautiful. That's the amazing thing that babies do, that they can have this long sleep after birth and to really take advantage of that. And sometimes if you're staying, for example, in hospital or in the postpartum ward, you don't really get that long sleep because maybe there's people coming in and out of the room or there's other people and there's noise. That's the beauty of going home straight after birth from a hospital or a birth center, like choosing that early discharge, or of course just birthing at home, that luxury of just crawling down into your own bed and actually having a proper longer sleep, especially also if you had a really long birth yourself, or any birth. I mean, it's nice to have that recovery together as a family.
It was absolutely beautiful. And it
Mm,
was a total of 6.5 hours of birth. But still, I felt like that good night of sleep was really, it just did magic on all of us.
yeah.
And then actually, David and I even woke up before Kylo woke up. And we just had these few moments of us just being there and again arriving in that space of okay, we are parents now, like fully with a fully present baby. And yeah, it was just magical, just admiring him and yeah, just flying away in a love bubble.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that birth center birth story. Now, if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural, empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
Yeah. So I think what I would definitely, I'm always struggling a little bit with advice because we're all so individual, right? So I would just say, from my experience, what has worked wonders for me, and the sort of wisdom that I would love to share is that trusting your body, your intuition, you can work on it. If you're not already super connected to it, it's something you can work on, but you have to do the work. And that work, of course, requires physical work, like could be yoga, it could be anything. Like it could also just be going swimming, or whatever. Of course, yoga is something where you get a really good connection to yourself, but it can be dancing. I think there's actually, I just read something recently that there's now studies showing like what a beautiful support dancing throughout pregnancy is for labor. Yeah, but I think preparing the physical, having a practice that you're coming back to and are supporting your body with, and that especially gets you in touch with everything, and so you know what your body feels like in different situations. Maybe also that helps you like know what it feels like to cross some limit, or to stretch your limits. And then of course also the mental, emotional, spiritual, and this is where I think the inner work comes in, which of course can take so many different shapes and forms, but it's something that really is so important, and it's just making such a big difference, for birth, for giving birth, but also in life. Because like anything that doesn't come up in birth will likely come up afterwards, when being a parent. And this is also where then again, all of the patterns that you have been, or that I have, well, for me, all of the patterns that I've been going through in the 6-7 years before becoming pregnant, like all of that, all of those themes, they all came up at some point throughout pregnancy. They all came out, or some of them came up again throughout birth or leading up to birth. And then anything that didn't come up for sure came up again now in my period of being a parent. And actually, like there was a moment, for example, about 3 months after birth, where we were again traveling in Bali, actually, where I felt like for me, it was like a quick run where almost all of the patterns and yeah, just mental themes that I had been going through the years before, like they all popped up in a matter of, I don't know, a week or so. And then in one night I had this just like this big realization, okay, this topic, this topic, this topic. And I think for me that just made it very clear that this spiritual inner work, it's essential. It's what's carrying us through life and through all of these situations. And I think the more dedication you put onto that, the easier it will be to go through the challenges that life is presenting you with. And that goes especially also for birth.
I love that. Beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Nina, for coming on and sharing your birthing wisdom and pearls of wisdom as well. And so beautiful that you now are available for women in Germany as a sacred birth worker as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Anna. It's such an honor. And also for having me on the mentorship. It's the biggest blessing ever.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.